The Outsider podcast shares the opinions and analyses of Drew Landry. They are his thoughts, and his thoughts alone, and do not necessarily reflect every member of his audience or newsletter readers. Now, on with the show.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Outsider Podcast. I'm your host as always, Drew Landry, and folks, it's so good to be with you. Thank you so much for making this the best politics podcast west of I-35 in the Lone Star State. So however, whenever, and wherever you are listening and or watching, you can find us there on YouTube. Please know that I'm incredibly grateful for your attention. Small little thing you'll notice here is, well, I'm wearing glasses. You don't usually see me wearing glasses in these podcasts, but if you're listening to it, you're not going to really, you won't know that I'm wearing glasses now, and since I just told you. But if you're watching this on Substack or on YouTube, you see, hey man, he's wearing glasses. I know. Hey, look, I'm styling and profiling. All right, so let's let's just roll with it here. But in today's episode, I want to give you some info as to what's on the docket. I only have a couple of things. Well, really a few things. I have an interview with Texas House District 33 Democratic candidate Orlando Lopez. All right, Orlando Lopez joined me for about a 30-minute conversation about his campaign and his viewpoints on the direction of Texas and the things he wants to do to improve our state. But before I do that, I want to give you a story about a potential candidate for lieutenant governor. Now, for those of you who have very little interest in Texas politics, well, you need to have just a little bit of interest here. So the lieutenant governorship in Texas is way different than it is in other states. In other states, the lieutenant governor is like an afterthought. All right, it doesn't really do much. And there are some states where they run as a running mate with the gubernatorial candidate, the guy running or the gal running for governor. But in Texas, we elect almost everybody. So because of that, our statewide elected officials are in their own separate election. And in our state, in the Lone Star State, the lieutenant governor, through informal abilities, is a force to be reckoned with. This is a position that gets to set the legislative agenda for the Texas Senate. This means that he has a lot of power to decide what comes to the Senate floor, what gets to be passed. I mean, it's you talk about having a hands-on approach to the legislative process. That's the lieutenant governor in Texas. Now, it should also be mentioned here that it's the senators who give him this power every single session. So, the senators could say we don't want to do that, but there's a lot of people who love this current lieutenant governor inside that Senate, so they continue to give him such power. So it'll be interesting to see if that will continue. But that aside, there's a candidate who wants to run for lieutenant governor for a third time, and his name is Mike Collier. Mike Collier ran as a Republican years ago. He switched over to become a Democrat. All right, he ran for controller in 2014 as a Democrat, and then in 2018 he ran as lieutenant governor as a Democrat. And in 2022 he came back and ran for lieutenant governor again as a Democrat. So he's a crossover from the old Republican mindset of business and all that, and now he's a Democrat who wanted to do a lot of things for education and stand up for for public school teachers, and really try to bring some common sense to those things. I met Mike Collier several times. He doesn't remember who I am, and that's fine. I don't lose sleep at night knowing that. Okay. But I think it's interesting to know that in 2018, and for those of you who may not know this, I actually ran for the state legislature in Texas in 2018 then, okay? So I was on the ballot the same time Beto O'Rourke was running against Rafael Cruz, better known as Ted Cruz, and Lupe Valdez was running for governor, and she was not a very good candidate at all. And then you had Mike Collier running for lieutenant governor. And then there was a whole host of others who were running for other particular statewide seats. It was all really going to come from the top. I mean, if O'Rourke was going to beat Cruz, then it seemed like that was, that the rest of them would follow suit. But, I didn't win my seat. Okay. Obviously you can see that. I don't think I need to remind anybody about that. But there are people who like to remind me about that, and they don't have a life, so good for them. But it's interesting to note here that that was the end of my stuff. Okay, I'm probably not going to run for anything ever again. All right, I know that I can put together a pretty good campaign and try, but I'm not going to win anything. I might be able to win a snail's race. I don't know. But that aside, I didn't run in 2020. But Mike Collier comes back in a 2022 as a lieutenant governor candidate. He actually had a primary competition there. He had to go to a runoff, and he ends up winning that. All right. So he runs as a Democrat 3 elections in a row, statewide elections. He was even Joe Biden's main guy in Texas. All right. He was like the in charge of Texas for Joe Biden. Was Mike Collier in 2020. All right, I was helping on a campaign around here in 2020. My candidate at the time, who I considered to be a good friend, hey, we did the best we could. It was a really fun campaign. Named John Gibson. Love John, respect John. Does a lot of good work for our area in the personal injury department, and for those who need workman's comp. There's a small plug. He didn't pay me for that. Maybe I ought to charge him for that. Anyway, and so he would I remember John going to a lunch meeting, and there was Mike Collier, and everyone was trying to get Biden to come to Texas and have a big rah, and and it was Collier who said it's not going to happen. I mean, it was Collier who was running the show for Biden in Texas. He was the guy. Okay, now here comes 2026. Okay, 2026, Mike Collier can understand that his time running for lieutenant governor is really over. All right, the Republicans don't want him anymore. The Democrats, he might stage a pretty good primary campaign, but look, that page has been turned. So time to really move on here. So when the Democrats were having their, when people started to file, for the parties, for the Republicans, for the Democrats, there was several people inside the Democratic side who were wanting that nomination. It eventually goes to Vicki Goodwin. What's interesting here is that Collier at some point says, I'm going to run as an independent. I'm running as an independent. And he goes on this little self-righteous streak about how people are tired of the two-party system. Oh, Of course, I'm being goofy because I like to be. But here's a quote from the Texas Tribune. It reads, "Both parties are moving to the extremes, leaving those of us in the center without a voice," he told the Texas Tribune this week. "The two-party system is failing us, and one thing I can do is help normalize independence running." Okay. So I like how the Tribune mentions here about what Texas law is. Any political party that got at least 20% of the vote in the last governor's race, okay, they have to actually hold a primary. All right. Primary elections is what you want to hold, you vote and leave. Easy. But if you're an independent candidate, well, you have to do a signing petition. You actually have to go out, knock on people's doors, get them to sign your petition to put you on the ballot. But there's caveats to that. So you have to get 1% of the total vote in the last governor's race. Okay? 1% of about, there's about maybe 81 million people who voted. No, I'm sorry, not 81 million. 8.1 million people who voted in 2022 in that last governor's race. About that. 1% of that, I'm going to guess here, is 81,000. So that said, that's the number of signatures that he would need to get. Now, according to Texas law, if you sign a petition for somebody, that means you can't participate in a primary and you can't participate in a runoff, nor can you participate in a convention unless that person you're signing for is in your party. Okay, so Mike Collier, running as an independent, tried to get people who would vote in the Democratic primary, tried to get them to sign it. If they signed it, they wouldn't be able to actually vote in the Democratic primary. Isn't that crazy? Not really. The idea is, if you're going to run as an independent candidate, then you have to get registered voters who are independent to sign your petition. So he has to get people who didn't vote in a primary, didn't vote in a runoff, didn't go to any conventions to sign his signature petition to get him on the ballot. All the signatures must be submitted by 30 days after the primary runoff. But a candidate cannot start gathering signatures until after the primary is decided. So they have about 113 days to collect signatures. And that's been the ball game, folks. It's been that way for a long time. And here's what Mike Collier had to say about this. The Tribune actually makes a good point. It says that Collier didn't fully understand the mountain he was trying to climb here. This is a Collier quote. A more cautious person would have studied it more carefully, but I wasn't going to let that decide whether I would try. Even once I learned what it required, I wouldn't have been motivated to file the lawsuit, except that the runoff turned an already insurmountable challenge into the absurd. So what he's saying here is, I didn't know what I was signing up for, and now that I have a lot to really do, I don't think it's fair. Okay. So he's trying to do this holier-than-thou shtick with the parties and the primaries and all this stuff. Look, if he really felt this way, then he wouldn't have ran for the Democratic nomination in 22. He wouldn't have been Joe Biden's guy for Texas in 2020. And he wouldn't have tried to be fourth on the ballot in 2018 as the lieutenant governor's candidate. So the only reason he's doing any of this is that, one, he can't get the signatures in time. I mean, he openly admits that. Excuse me, I didn't mean to hit that microphone. My bad. Here's, quoting from the Texas Tribune. Collier estimates that he would need 1,500 volunteers gathering several signatures an hour, which is a challenge since about 2/3 of the people he has encountered during the petition are disqualified because they voted in a primary. He sought bids for companies to help him gather signatures. One came in over $3.2 million, even before the timeline was cut short. So he's saying, I don't have the groundwork, I don't have the money, so here, how can I change this? I'll just do a lawsuit. I'll sue the state. Oh my God. Mike, you're being ridiculous. Just stop this. This is like the dumbest thing you have ever done. And you're a smart guy. Mike Collier is a smart guy. All right? He's in the financial world. He's an accountant. This is a guy who knows numbers, and he talks in wonky ways. That aside, he should realize that this is for naught. What he's trying to do is just trying to get on the stage with Dan Patrick and Vicki Goodwin. And if he really felt that this was a problem, he wouldn't have ran as a Democrat all those years ago. He would have been trying this for some time. Dude, I would also like to remind you that 20 years ago, all right, in 2006, there was not one but two independent challengers for governor against Rick Perry. You had Carol Keaton Rylander Strayhorn. It's a heck of a name. May she rest in peace. And Kinky Friedman. Also a heck of a name. May he also rest in peace. Those two individuals got enough signatures to be on the ballot for governor in 2006. They didn't whine and complain and jump up and down and say, and do all the malarkey you're doing here. I mean, Rylander Strayhorn was a former Republican. She couldn't stand Rick Perry. And so she wanted to run against him. And so she ran against him as an independent candidate. Interestingly enough, all right, Strayhorn and Friedman combined got 32% of the popular vote. All right, the Democrat there was Chris Bell. He got 29% of the vote. Perry ends up winning that with 39% of the vote. But why do I mention that? Because if those two can do it, if Friedman and Strayhorn can do this, if they can muster enough support from the ground, then Collier, so can you. Suck it up, dude. Quit whining about it's a bad bit. I don't like it. It's a good thing. Spare me. All right. Let's also know he's probably not getting enough donations. People know he can't win. They tried once, twice. He got real close in 2018. He came within 5 points. Five or so. I mean, and that shocked Dan Patrick, which, is a bit of a stunner because people never really thought that Dan Patrick had much of a heart anyway. To be shocked. But that said, get real, Mike. Just wrap this thing up. Don't even try to do this stupid lawsuit. Just end this thing and get behind Vicki Goodwin. She needs your help. All right? And you would be a really good soldier, and you would be well thought of within a lot of circles and within this state as being someone who's trying to unite behind a candidate who you have a common foe. Okay? So there's that. And this is just hilarious. Because now we have to talk about Mike Collier. All right? And that's another reason to get his name out there. Well, people will hear me. They'll see my name again. Anybody who's been paying attention to all that is just rolling their eyes. And what's he doing? Why is he doing that? This is so stupid. That's story number one, that I wanted to share with you. Another one here has really been the big story of the week. Big story of over the last few days, and it's been the Memorandum of Understanding that the United States has signed with the Islamic Republic of Iran. Now, let's understand what's been taking place here. Suddenly, Donald Trump, President Trump, woke up and said, hey, I should bomb Iran. And so he did. This happened in late February, okay, a little less than 4 months ago. And the president realizes he's tanking in the polls. His approvals are terrible, and he thinks, if I can just get some victory here, then my numbers will go up. And I can get a better deal than Obama with Iran to make sure they didn't have a nuclear weapon. Well, I don't know what reality this president lives in. I have no idea. It must be Truth Social world. But President Ramblefest and President, Sleepy Don, Dozing Don, I don't know where he's been. But Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon. It didn't before this. It didn't have one under Biden. Didn't have one under Obama or Bush. Like what the heck, dude? And so here you are fear-mongering, and what is so wonderful about that is that there are people on his side who questioned it, like Tucker Carlson, which I don't ever think Tucker Carlson does a lot of good of anything. Like, why is this a thing? Why are we bombing Iran? Let's also understand that there are people who will defend anything this president does. And small side note here, if Trump derangement syndrome is where the president is wrong on everything, that he's this orange Hitler, and he's, Franco and Tojo and Mussolini, and, he's all these, terrible actors in world history. That's Trump derangement syndrome. If that's the case, then isn't being hypnotized to thinking everything that guy does is great is also Trump derangement syndrome? That goes both ways, people. If you think the president urinates gold and can do no wrong, you also suffer from Trump derangement syndrome. TDS is not just a one-way street. But what really gripes me here is that if you dare to criticize anything that the guy does and you actually have evidence and proof of it, now they throw that TDS at you. You try to hold people accountable and somehow you're deranged. That is the dumbest thing. That means they have no other response. So if people are going to comment on this video and say that I have Trump derangement syndrome, then you've really lost your marbles. That aside, when we look at what happened here with Iran, and we have this MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, let's understand what that is anyway, what an MOU is. It's a framework to do future work. We are officially saying that we will work together on something. And this thing is 14 paragraphs. It's 14 points. And I don't want to go through all of them because that would take longer than what's necessary here. But here's a second part. Here's the second paragraph here. It says, the United States of America and the Islamic Republic of Iran undertake to respect each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity and to refrain from interfering in each other's internal affairs. While this seems rather, benign, each country accused the other of trying to get involved with their stuff. So what they're trying to do is say, we'll both stay out of each other's way. The U.S. and Iran commit to negotiating and achieving the final deal in a maximum 60 days extendable with mutual consent. Okay, we'll do something here in 60 days. So, whatever. Upon immediate signing of this, the U.S. will begin the removal of its naval blockade and any disturbances or impediments, sorry, let me pronounce it correctly, impediments against Iran will fully end the naval blockade within a month, within 30 days. During this period, the traffic of vessels will be in proportion to the number of pre-war traffic being restored by Iran, and the U.S. further undertakes to remove its forces from the proximity of Iran within 30 days of the final deal. So the U.S. is freeing Iran. It can now do its thing in the Strait of Hormuz. And good for them. But here's a big part. When, upon signing, the Islamic Republic of Iran, right, Iran will make arrangements using its best efforts for the safe passage of commercial vessels with no charge for 60 days, only from the Persian Gulf to the Sea of Oman, and vice versa. The traffic of commercial vessels will immediately start, and considering the need for removing the technical and military obstacles and demining by Iran. That will be instated within 30 days. So the key line here is the no charge for 60 days only. After that, Iran can impose those fees as it did before. It never had those fees. It can now impose fees, which it never did. So free passage is over. Once you get past those 60 days, you can't go through the Strait of Hormuz for free, despite what Marco Rubio said, Secretary of State. Here's the big part here. The U.S. undertakes with regional partners to develop a definitive, mutually agreed plan with at least $300 billion U.S. dollars for the reconstruction and economic development of Iran. The mechanism for implementation of this plan will be finalized as part of a final deal within 60 days. All required licenses, waivers, permissions needed for the relevant financial transactions will be granted by the U.S. So, what the president said earlier in the week is that he keeps on insisting that the U.S. is not going to invest in Iran. We're not going to spend that $300 billion. But he appeared to leave it open that the possibility that the Persian Gulf states could provide that money. It's a sensitive issue for the president, seeing how he constantly just barraged President Obama for shipping $1.7 billion in cash in that 2015 deal. What they often forget is that that $1 billion was unfreezed assets from 1979. Here's paragraph 7. The U.S. undertakes to terminate all type of sanctions against Iran, including the United Nations and the IAEA, and all unilateral U.S. sanctions, primary and secondary, in an agreed-upon schedule as part of the final deal. Interesting. So we're going to lift a lot of our sanctions, a lot of our economic sanctions. And that was really the only thing that brought Iran to the negotiating table, to actually surrender its nuclear program, as that was the basis for the 2015 deal. This is so dumb. Iran reaffirms, this is paragraph 8, Iran reaffirms that it shall not procure or develop nuclear weapons. The U.S. and Iran have agreed to resolve the disposition of stockpiled, enriched material pursuant to a mechanism that will be mutually agreed upon in accordance with the schedule mentioned in paragraph 7. That's really funny because we kept hearing about how they don't have any weapons because Trump blew them all up. Okay. But the paragraph requires Iran to downblend or dilute the approximately 11 tons of enriched nuclear material in its possession, including 970 pounds that are enriched to 60%, just short of bomb grade. But it does not require Iran to give up that material and ship it out of the country. Iran has resisted calls to surrender the stockpile, but it did exactly that in 2015. Jeez Louise. Paragraph 9 here, the U.S., pending the final deal, the U.S. and Iran agree to maintain the status quo. Iran will maintain the current status quo of its nuclear program, and the U.S. will not impose any sanctions. So we're going to beat the crap out of you, but you get to keep everything. This clause was important to establish a clear baseline for negotiations. Paragraph 10, the U.S. undertakes immediately upon the signing of here and the termination of all sanctions, the U.S. Department of Treasury will issue waivers for the export of Iranian crude oil, petroleum products and derivatives, and all associated services, including banking transactions, insurances, and all that. This triggered an alarm among Iran hawks who have asked why Trump would even partially relax sanctions on Iran's oil. The United States will be trading away its most durable economic lever before the hard part of negotiations even starts. Here's paragraph 11. The U.S. undertakes to make fully available for the use of frozen and unrestricted, the use of frozen or restricted funds and assets to Iran upon the MOU's implementation. The U.S. and Iran will mutually agree on the procedures related to the release of these funds during negotiations. So they're going to get the frozen funds, which is $24 billion or more. Oh my gosh. Here's paragraph 12. The U.S. and Iran agree that an executive mechanism will be established to monitor the successful implementation. So they're going to make sure that things are verifiable. 13 reads here that the subject to the beginning of implementation paragraphs 1, 4, 5, 10, and 11, and the continuing implementation of these measures, U.S. and Iran will start negotiating regarding the final deal. And paragraph 15 says the final deal will be endorsed by a binding United Nations Security Council resolution. This is just... So that's the MOU. So all that is just a basic framework of what this whole negotiation process will be. All right, but in the interim, they agree to do these certain things, like open up the strait, let Iran start trading its oil, all that, all those, and to keep low levels of uranium. We can find the posts. Complete and total surrender is what he said. Didn't get it. Taco. Trump always chickens out. Taco. This is just absurd. Look, there's a reason the president has an approval rating of about 40%. There's a reason that Democrats are in favor of the Republicans of an average of about 5 points. There's a reason that certain races in this state, in this midterm, are closer than what they should be. You know? And it's all because of him. Republicans will have one person to blame for all this, and it's Donald Trump. I mean, there's a governor's race in Florida where it's actually like fairly competitive at this moment. Now, there hasn't been the primary yet. Republicans haven't and Democrats haven't nominated their candidates, but there's been some surveys at this moment to suggest that it's neck and neck between the front runners. And you got to wonder, how is that the case? One name. President Donald Trump. He's the albatross hanging around Republicans' necks. But, that's the way it is now. And I always have to say this. I always have to bring this up. Public opinion is not set in stone. It is fluid. It could change. Maybe we'll get gas down to 250. And then maybe people will start feeling better about the economy, and people will start actually to feel these types of changes that have been trying to be implemented over the last year and a half. And then maybe that'll change the perception that is given of the president and the Republicans. And given just that amount of time to where they're going to have this midterm convention to try to rally the troops to get them excited to vote in the primary in the midterm general election. So yeah, maybe all that will happen. We don't know. But where things are right now, in mid-June, where the election is about 4 months away, less than 4 months away, in about 3 months, we're going to be early voting here in Texas. It ain't looking good for the Republicans. I've never seen a group of people be more scared than what I've seen right now. And they are just grasping for all the straws and saying all the crazy things that, wow, we're going to lose if you guys don't go vote. That's the most basic thing in the world. If your supporters don't show up, of course you're not going to win. Anyway, the point that I'm trying to make here is that unless things don't change, if we just feel like we're constantly in this lamaze, this constant feel of like, I don't know, zombie mode, Republicans are just going to get their butts handed to them in November. And there's that. Okay. Those were the two things I wanted to spend time with you on before I get to my interview with Orlando Lopez, and I have that for you right here. Joining me in today's episode is Orlando Lopez, who's running for House District 33 in the Texas legislature. Orlando, thanks for joining the Outsider Podcast. It's such an honor to have you on. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Drew. I've been following your podcast for a while now. I think some of the first emails I started getting when I kicked off my campaign late last year, was the Outsider Podcast. So I chose to, or what I was intrigued, right? Wanted to learn more about Texas politics, and sure enough, I got hooked. Mostly listened through Substack, but yeah, a lot of great content.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you for that. I honestly don't really ever think anyone, it reaches far, but hey, you're out there in the metroplexes, and so I appreciate the listen and the attention. So thank you for that. So I want to focus more on you here, and I'm curious. Tell our listeners, tell the audience here, like, have you always been in politics? Like, have you always been interested in this? Like, what caused you to want to run for House District 33?
Sure. So I'll take a step back. No, I was never, ever involved. Never really interested in politics. As a matter of fact, I took political science twice in college, and not because I needed to. But the first time I got a C, it was just one of those filler courses. The second time I was like, well, I need to meet my minimum 12 hours. I'll just take it again. But no, it was probably the furthest from what I wanted to do. I chose to focus my career more on, I come from an immigrant family, so they were like, no, get a real job, So I was like, they told me the same thing when I tried to go into math. But I decided to focus on construction, and really that's what I started doing once I got out of school. I graduated from A&M. Don't hold that against me. I, started working in Houston in the commercial construction space, and then got an opportunity in DFW in 2016, the end of 2016, and been up here ever since doing multifamily apartment building. And, there's there's a lot that I feel like I've learned from there, a lot that I would love to keep doing. And through construction, really, that's gotten me in touch more with our workforce, the industry, right? And not hard at all to guess what the majority of our labor force is made of in construction. We have a lot of immigrants, documented, undocumented, it doesn't matter. They really help drive construction, one of the industries, and make it one of the best in Texas, making Texas the eighth largest economy in the world, right? So part of it is part of why I wanted to get into politics. That's a small part of it, right? But really, the main reason was looking at my daughter, looking at what's going on. I There was a point when it started in 22, right? We see Roe v. Wade, get struck down, and you just kind of keep seeing all these. They plan to start targeting members of the LGBTQ community, members of the Islamic faith. So, it comes. You'll realize that they slowly start chipping away at rights, and I don't want to get to a point where I look at my daughter, where she's old enough to understand, and I'm like, well, back in the day, your mom had more rights than you did. Heck, my mom, your grandmother, had more rights than you did. That's not at all what I want for her. I grew up Texas, born and raised here. Man, I was always so proud. I had so much pride every time I told someone I was from Texas. Like, no, 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 I'm not just from the United States. We used to travel a lot. My dad was a missionary, so we went out of the country a lot. And when people would ask, say, yes, I'm American, but I'm also Texan. So that was really the thing that would give me a lot of pride. And Texas has just become really hard to recognize. That I grew up believing that, you know, by the time I could remember, I was born in '92. George Bush, took over in '94. So from the time I remember, Texas was a Republican state, at least in my
Mhm.
mind. So that to me was, well, you know what? I'm Texan, therefore I'm Republican. And that was, I never voted Republican. I will say that. I thought I was Republican, but once I started voting, I would say like, well, I'm kind of more conservative, but I'll vote for this Democrat, just because I agree more with their views. And soon enough, you end up just saying, why am I lying to myself? I'm a Democrat. We just get so used to hearing it as an ugly word in Texas that you don't want to believe that you are. But I, I'm proud to say that I am a Texas Democrat, and I stepped up to the plate to run for this position because first of all, no one ran in 24 against Katrina Pearson, so I didn't want that to happen again this time, and I've got no experience, but that doesn't mean I'm not willing to do what I have to let people know that I care about the same issues they do, that I care about our public schools, that I care about the Texas workforce, that I care about others like me because I am them. I am part of the working class, and we need to elevate the working class and truly give Texas back to the people.
Mhm. Yeah, that what a story. I mean, that is such an interesting and cool story that you just shared there. Thank you for doing that. And I gotta say, Katrina Pearson doesn't really seem like, and no offense to her, well, maybe I
Mm-hmm.
do, but that's me talking. I'm behind a microphone. It doesn't matter. But that it seems that she's has some extreme viewpoints that may not really be like in the mainstream. I mean, she was a big voice for the voucher fight, and all the other extreme, social, culture things. You
Right.
looking at that and you're saying, what is going on? Like was that some of your motivation, or was it just to be a challenge? Or speak more about that, please.
Yeah. So I'll be honest. I hadn't really looked so much into a lot of her viewpoints, a lot of her policies prior to even considering running. But I did know she was a strong voice for those Texas vouchers. And the more I got interested, the more I started looking into what she's been a part of, what she's participated in the past. You look at some of her history. She was involved with the Tea Party, and she I don't know if it was several times, or I know at least once she made she was a huge proponent of like, hey, Texas needs to secede from the Union, which
Yeah.
it just makes me laugh sometimes because she's like, well, my constituents want me to run for Congress. I'm like, really? And then, I'll tell you a quick little quip here, but they just unveiled a monument of the Ten Commandments here in Rockwall. So I went to the historic courthouse for that, where her office is, and this was on a Saturday.
Mhm.
And funny enough, she's the one up there saying the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'm like, man, this is absolutely rich. Someone who wanted to secede from the Union, right up in front of a lot of members of the Republican Party. And I wasn't trying to instigate anything. I was just
Sure.
like, I haven't had the opportunity to meet her, so here's my chance. And I met her. We exchanged a few pleasantries, but to get back to your original question, yeah, I mean, she's been involved with so much. You pull up her Wikipedia, and I'm not going to cite anything from Wikipedia, but this is just
Sure.
you know, um,
Yeah.
her longest paragraph there. It's all involved around January 6th. How
Oh,
she helped, apparently was a liaison, was speaking from the White House. She was a former spokesperson for Trump, helped get him elected back in 2016.
mhm.
Um, and rumor on the street is when they brought her in here, and I have not been able to confirm this, so I will say she was allegedly given a home in Rockwall County, um, to establish residency. This was back in 23. So that way she could primary Justin Holland, and she was able to run away with it in the runoff election back then. But
Yeah.
yeah, her views are just extreme.
Absolutely. And I heard the same rumor. I heard the exact same thing. Of course, I mean, the way I remember your opponent was that when it was in the Republican primary in 2016, Ted Cruz, who was still in the race at the time, was being accused of having like four or five different mistresses, which is hilarious. But it was Trump who had the friend at the at one of those tabloids. I forget which one it was. It might have been the Inquirer. Leaked this story, and they all like had their faces or like blurred out or something, and people did some deep digging and found out that one of those faces was uh, Katrina Pearson here. So I just had
Oh,
to laugh that she was part of this particular group that was accused of being a
yeah.
mistress for Ted Cruz. And I thought, there's no way that more than one woman wants to be with Ted Cruz.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I hadn't heard that rumor before.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, it's very interesting. But I won't repeat something unless if especially if I don't know it's true. If I know it
That's
is,
good
then
on you.
I'll say it. But it's just the nature of things. I don't want to be um, called out. I'm
Yeah.
one of my biggest insecurities is man, you're not. He's not that smart when I say something untruthful. So that's
Oh,
what I'm trying to avoid. But that is funny though. I will say that is
yeah.
pretty funny.
That I gotta, give you a little bit of kudos there. I mean, it's good on you that you're like, I just, that's fine for you podcasters to say stuff like that. I'm not gonna get into that. Good for you. Good. I think that's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about your campaign and something a bit more serious.
Hmm. Hmm.
What are some of the things that you want to do in the legislature? Should and when you take the office?
Sure. So one of the big things, my wife is a former educator. She was a public school teacher. She was a counselor. So education is huge for us. We want to send our daughter to public school. Both of us are a product of public schools. We both went to school in the Rio Grande Valley. Both graduated from A&M, so she's an Aggie as
Yeah.
well. All public school.
Hmm.
So we have that holds a dear place in our hearts. So part of the legislation that I will support will definitely be getting rid of the vouchers, doing
Yeah.
what we can to fully fund our public schools, giving our teachers a raise. I mean, that is massive. I was pulling up some of the numbers, and we've got something like over 400,000 teachers in the state of Texas, and I believe the average salary, well below the national average, is around 62 and a half. And to give each of them a raise up to, a minimum of $100,000 would be about $15 billion. which, that sounds like a lot of money, but in the grand
Mhm.
scheme of things, it's very, very doable. And I think our teachers, they deserve a raise. That they put up with a lot, and things have just been getting tougher, especially after COVID. I mean, my wife would tell me stories of just how far behind a lot of these kids were,
Yeah.
socially and academically. So that would be a big starting point for me. Teachers they should be able to live off one salary for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
I've it's unreal. I mean,
Hmm.
2026, and here we are.
Yeah. Yeah. Needing two or three jobs. And, that's
Hmm.
turning into something of a bit of a norm for a lot of workers. One job should be enough. And I couldn't agree more with you. I had Sarah McGee, who's from the Houston area on the show, last week. Well, the week before last. And I asked
Hmm.
her this question. I'm going to pose the same thing to you. Should you win and should House Speaker Dustin Burrows win his reelection and then he comes back wanting to be Speaker again, do you plan on voting for him? Would he have your vote for House Speaker, or would you say, well, if I'm in it, I mean, Democrats probably took over the House, so no thanks, or you gonna keep your options open, or have you even thought about it?
Right. I've given it a little bit of thought, especially after, the Texas Democratic Party chair put out, what was it, a statement, a memo,
Yeah.
asking Democrats not to support him. And, a lot of the main reason why I'm in this race is because of Kendall. I the very first event I went to was a chili cook-off fundraiser, and he
Mm.
just so happened to be there. It was in Rockwall County where I was meeting with the county party chair, and I was still riding that high where I was like, I'm going to run for this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to change the world. And I had normally a lot of these thoughts I would have died after a few days, and I think that probably would have happened had I not met Kendall Scudder. I was able to have some one-on-one with him, not fully knowing so much about the Democratic Party, and I believe that his vision is a good one for the party. And if he has, there's a reason for him to ask Democrats not to back Dustin Burrows, then I want to be able to trust in that. And so my answer is I will most likely not back Dustin Burrows as a speaker because first off, I do believe we are going to take the majority in the House.
Hmm.
So it's I don't know if I should say an amazing time right now in Texas politics. It's just very different for sure. A lot of change. But
Hmm.
that's not why I joined. I didn't join to be part of a winning team. I joined to, do something for my community and for my family because anything that I do in the best interest of my family will be in the best interest of other families as well.
Yeah. So, well, you may not have won, you may not have thought that you were joining a winning team, you're joining a fighting team. And so,
That's right. That's a better way to say it. Yep.
yeah,
Hmm.
so yeah, that's the middle class needs a fighter, and this is something that I don't know if you know this, but I ran against Dustin Burrows in 2018.
Hmm.
Obviously, we can tell how that turned out. And I what got me into it was the fact nobody was talking about my issues that I thought were important, which is kind of what I'm hearing from you too. You have a set of ideas that you think needs to be heard, and the person sitting in that position right now isn't either talking about it or isn't talking about it in the way that you think that people should be talking about it.
Hmm.
Or
Hmm.
so I think that's fantastic that you're going to go in there with the idea here. Hey, look, I'm talking about issues, and these are good enough issues that can propel me uh, over the finish line before the person who I'm running against. And I think that's fantastic.
Hmm.
I want to ask you here now about like you talked about public education being one of your issues. Is there another one that you think is something that, hey, look, this next session we have to talk about this.
Right. Right. So immigrants is another one of my main focuses. I've been putting it as number two, really tying it to the Texas workforce, like I mentioned. And we go back a few months, when construction was at a standstill in the Rio Grande Valley. So, like I said, both my wife and I, born and raised in the valley, So we still kind of keep up with a few of the instances there. All our family is down there, and it's not impossible that something like that could happen in the DFW area. I know it's a booming place for construction, but we have seen enough construction slow down that it's going to make an impact. So part of what I believe in is we have a lot of these folks, some that have been here undocumented, and I'm not. I want to do away with the notion that a lot of us Democrats want open borders. That's not at all
Right.
what we want.
Yeah,
We just
exactly.
we recognize the worth that a lot of immigrants, a lot of undocumented immigrants bring to our state. We make it easier for a lot of them to achieve the documented status, and they have so much more that can contribute to the state. I mean, they're already contributing, on average about $5.1 billion every year in taxes to the
Yep.
state. And
Yep.
contrary to what a lot of these Republican leaders say, they don't see any of those benefits. They keep saying, "Oh, they're getting free healthcare." Like there's a difference there. I mean, there's emergency healthcare, which obviously you're not going to leave someone dying on the street if they've got, been in an emergency or something like that. But
That's right.
you know, if we're able to make it more accessible for a lot of these workers to get their citizenship, I think we have a lot more to gain from that.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you make a really good point there because it was also these same type of leaders who were complaining about Abbott's, transportation system, like,
Hmm.
that whole busing thing. And oh, they're getting free rides. Well, then, do you know who's doing those free rides? Do you
Yeah.
understand what's happening there? And then like, these mayors said, okay, no more buses coming in from Texas, so Abbott puts them on a plane. And then you get
Hmm.
people saying, "Oh, they're getting free plane rides." Well, do you not realize who's doing this sort of thing? Like
Yep.
he's the one using our tax dollars to do that. It's not
Hmm.
anyone. It's not like some nefarious conspiracy to try to do that. But you make another really good point about how we make money. Like the state makes billions of dollars off of immigrants who are here by paying the sales tax. It's not like they get some sort of a sales tax exemption. Oh, well, you're
Right.
not legally here.
Right.
Well, you don't get to pay a sales tax. Huh?
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
And it's
And
it's it's always been surreal to me that the legislature likes to do a cost
hmm
analysis of those who are here, but they don't ever want to do a cost benefit analysis.
right.
And so but because they know if they did that, the benefits would far outweigh the
Oh
costs
yeah.
of that. So yeah, you're gonna say
Absolutely.
something. Go ahead.
No, no, I was just going to say, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that leads me, to almost want to, it makes me want to put something like that together, a cost
Yeah.
benefit analysis. And, I'm a numbers guy. I love seeing what numbers are out there because, data is not going to lie to you. I mean, it's
Mhm.
factual. Well, a lot of us believe it, but, you talk to a lot of these other MAGA folks, they don't believe in data. Um, anyway, but yeah, that's definitely something that I would love to take a look at and present those kinds of numbers.
Yeah, that's always something to really look into, and I think that's pretty fantastic. So tell our audience here, where exactly is HD33? Where does that go?
Yeah. Um, so HD33, it currently sits. It's the majority of it is Rockwall County, and it's got a little sliver of southeast Collin County that goes from Richardson on the east all the way to Wiley in the west. So it almost looks like a pot with a pretty lengthy handle. So it's just immediately it goes completely around Dallas County.
Okay.
So we're just bordering Dallas County. So I've got
Hmm.
the majority of the district is Rockwall, and I've got some of Collin, but the bluest parts in the district are in Collin County.
Yeah. And if you would have said that 10 years ago, everyone would have laughed. Like there's blue parts in
Yeah.
Collin County. What are you
Hmm.
talking about? But now, I
Hmm.
mean, it's yeah, absolutely. So that's pretty interesting that we're
Yeah.
seeing this change take place. Yeah.
You look at and this I didn't know, but so far the only Democratic incumbent in Collin County right now is Mihaela Palisa. And
Hmm.
one of the things I didn't know is that her district, District 70, used to be Ken Paxton's back in the day. So I didn't know that, but who would have thought, right? 10 years
Yeah.
ago, oh, that'll
Eh,
belong to a Democrat.
exactly.
So
And, the Republicans want that seat. And so, they want to keep Katrina Pearson where she is, and they want to kick, Polisa out. And it's
right,
so funny to me because, she was one of those Democrats who gave a nominating speech for Dustin Burrows back in 2025. She was one who said, we need to keep it to be the Texas House, not Washington, our Texas. And, she constantly talked about that. And now they're just saying, thanks. Now we're coming after you. Talk about just a big, knife in the back. I mean, what a backstab. I mean, this is, this is a group of people who just don't care about relationships. They don't care about, a coalition building. They just care about power.
right,
And
right.
even if you helped them,
Hmm.
you're on the wrong team. Screw you. We're coming after you.
Yeah. And one of the statements, I've been going through the voting record from the 89th legislature, and
Hmm.
one of the statements that Katrina Pearson made, this was, heck, I think it was one of the first resolutions. We'll have to go back and look at the number, but it's pretty much where they made all these changes. They eliminated all the Democratic chairs. Um, um, and she made a comment about, well, my district has been very vocal about not wanting to share power, and this is an absolute power grab. I mean, I agree. It's not like it's not like Republicans are going to be completely out of the House. So we're going to have to work with them once we get to the House, if I make it there. So I understand the need for that. It's important to have Republicans be chairing something. It's important to have Democrats chairing some other committees. So I believe we need to work with that. But to outright want to dismantle the minority party, not try to strip any power from them, is just
Yeah.
it's unreal to me.
Absolutely. And, it was what's often forgotten is that it was Democrats who started this entire tradition. Like it was Speaker Billy Clayton in the 1980s that started this. And then Gib Lewis continued it, Pete Laney continued it, even Tom Craddock, whenever he was the first Republican speaker since Reconstruction, he did it.
Hmm.
And it kept going until this time around, and they finally got the person who would bring it to a vote and all that stuff. And it just is like, we helped you get here, and now
Hmm.
now that you're up here, you're going to kick the ladder so that we can't do this coalition bipartisan sense of governing anymore.
Right.
And so with that in mind, I mean, it seems like you might have the idea to say, hey, look, let's kind of go back to what it was. I mean, we can have, bipartisan coalition governing. Did I read that wrong? Would you be okay if there's a Democratic speaker and they elect and they have Republican chairs?
I think I would be okay with that. Granted, a lot of these Republicans are, willing to work with us. There's a difference between Republicans and MAGA Republicans.
Hmm.
So MAGA Republicans, I know they, Katrina Pearson being one of them, they want that power. They're focusing on that power grab, and I believe there's a lot of good Republicans still out there. Of course, they have their own views. We have our own views,
Hmm.
and I think as long as we're all on the same page about working together for a better Texas, then why not? You know?
Yeah. Hey, fair enough. I think that's completely logical. Orlando, give us just about 30, 45 seconds here about your final touches of your campaign speech. Tell us where we can find you, where people can donate, all that stuff.
Sure. So the main reason I'm running, like I said, I'm running because keeping my head down wasn't an option for me. I'm running because I want my daughter to know that I stepped up and I was willing to do something instead of waiting for someone else to be that person. And I'm running because that's the type of person my family raised me to be. And even if I don't win in November, I don't plan on going away. So my name is Orlando Lopez. I am running for House District 33. You can find out more information about me at www.lopez4fortxhd.com. www.lopezhd33.com. Again, that's www.lopezfortxhd33.com. Not very simple, right? But could have made it. I'll make it easier on the next one. But follow me in my socials too.
And what are your social handles?
Yes. So Facebook, you can just look at Orlando Lopez for Texas House District 33. I'm on X. It's at Lopez 4 TXHD33, and Instagram, which this is all lowercase, Lopez dot number 4 dot TX dot HD dot 33. So try to get them all as close to each other, but they're all linked to my website anyway, so they can be accessed through there.
Awesome. I'll tell you what I'll do. Those who are watching, you have seen it already. I have added in those particular handles, and they've already appeared on there, so they're getting a visual of this, and so they can actually see what you just said there. So there was the website and the socials, and they were all given a visual so that they can see what you just said there. Orlando, hey. Man, I think it's great. I think it's awesome that you're taking up this particular fight. It takes a lot of chutzpah to even consider running for one, and I think it's awesome. And we're all following your campaign. We're all watching you, and we wish you all the best all the way over here in West Texas. And we're gonna, when it comes to November, we know you're gonna give it all that you got, and let's take that seat. Thanks for being on here, Orlando. I appreciate your time this evening. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you, Drew.
Folks, that's all from me today. Special thank you to Orlando Lopez for joining the Outsider Podcast. I have had some candidates reach out to me to want to be on the program. I will give them the space to do that. And hopefully you enjoyed the conversation and you enjoy listening to them and hearing in on that. So be on the lookout here over the next couple weeks for some more candidate conversations with me here on the podcast. But here's how they were able to actually do that. Because they were able to, one, listen in, and two, they emailed me. And look, my email right here. drew.landry9@gmail.com. Put in the subject head candidate appearance, something like that, and we can get that ball rolling. Folks, I have an open mic policy. I'll talk to anybody. I don't care who it is. I mean, you want to get, if you have some talking dog, or like Shrek is a talking donkey, let's get them on here. I don't care. We'll have a conversation, and they don't have to be people who agree with me. We can get people who completely disagree with me, and that would make for a very fun show. Things might get a little wild, but understand that it doesn't necessarily have to be people who are always on my side of things. I mean, if you know somebody who you'd like, hey, I want that person to just go after Drew, well, send them my way. drew.landry9@gmail.com, and we can work to set that up. Thank you so much for watching or listening to the Outsider Podcast. I greatly appreciate your attention, your viewership, your listenership, and I really hope you can share this episode and all the other shows, all the other episodes that I have on the Outsider Podcast. Really trying to expand my base here, so would greatly appreciate word of mouth with that. Thank you so much for that. And finally, again, I just want to reiterate, I'm so grateful for you for listening and watching. And folks, I'll see you again very, very soon.
The preceding analyses and opinions were that of Drew Landry and his alone. They did not necessarily reflect all of his podcast listeners or newsletter readers. Thank you for listening to the Outsider Podcast. Be sure to follow The Outsider on X and on Facebook. Also, don't forget to sign up to be a free subscriber to his newsletter on Substack. Just look for The Outsider. We will see you again next time.